2, 1. Okay. All right, we are live. People will start coming in now. Oh, and we're live streaming. Great. All right, well, people are coming in. Thank you for joining us. We'll get started in a second. Just let more people trickle in. Hi, Louise. Thank you for joining from Brazil. All right, we're going to get started. All right, so hi, everyone, and welcome to our virtual greenhouse gas plan town hall. Tonight, we'll be discussing the City of Miami's plan to work towards carbon neutrality by 2050. I want to start by thanking Commissioner Russell for, one, coming up with the idea for this meeting and also for co-hosting with us tonight. Before I hand it over to him, I want to provide a brief overview of our agenda for the meeting and some quick housekeeping. This meeting will be broken into 3 sections: transportation, building, and then additional actions. We will dedicate roughly 25 minutes to each area. Everyone who is registered was asked to pre-submit questions, so we have some teed up questions for the evening, but feel free to pose additional questions in the Q&A box at the bottom of the screen in case there is extra time. And please use the Q&A and not the chat if you would like to pose an additional question. Thank you so much for joining us. I will now pass it over to Commissioner Ken Russell, and then after that, the Deputy Chief Resilience Officer, Chris Bennett. Take it away, Commissioner.
Alyssa, thank you to you and your team. It's amazing that the city even has a Department of Resilience and Public Works. We didn't have that so long ago. There's a lot we didn't have, and we've come a long way. So I'd like to introduce myself. I'm Ken Russell. I'm your chairman of the City of Miami Commission and the commissioner for District 2, which is 90% of the waterfront of the city of Miami. And when I came into office 5-6 years ago, we had just formed our sea level rise committee. We did not have a lot of policy in place or funding in place to address the issues. I became the chairman of the Downtown Development Authority, which basically, I don't want to say had its head in the sand, but it was very reluctant to discuss storm surge and sea level rise and these issues that face us on an existential basis, because it might be a negative advertisement for investment in Miami. And I made the case that no, we need to be on the forefront of this discussion to show that we are mitigating these issues, these causes. We need to find out, well, if you're addicted to carbon, first you admit you have a problem. That's step 1. And so we decided to tackle this and be very forthright that Miami is addressing these issues. We're being serious about them because we know that the future of our city depends on it. And we've come a long way since then. A really big turning point for us was our then mayor, Tomas Regalado, a conservative mayor, an elderly statesman of a mayor, but he embraced the challenges ahead of us. And I remember in 2015 at a Republican presidential debate on CNN, he posed a question to all of the candidates then running for president. What was their plan to save Miami and the United States from sea level rise and storm surge and climate change? And that was a turning point for me, that I knew Miami is ahead of the game on this, because we have the political backing of all parties, all sides, and all people to tackle these issues. It's not that easy at the state or federal level, but we've got that because of you, the voters, having our back to make the hard decisions. And the first hard decision you made was approving as voters the Miami Forever bond. This was huge. It did not pass unanimously at our commission. It squeaked by. It actually failed the first year, and it squeaked by the second year on a 3-2 vote. But the voters overwhelmingly decided it was worth investing in our community for its future. And the Miami Forever bond has $200 million in it that we can spend on resilience projects and infrastructure. And from there, it went to policy. It started with simple things like eliminating permitting fees for solar panels. But now, even this week, we are taking on benchmarking of carbon emissions, so that we can measure ourselves where we stand as a city in order to reach our goals. If we're truly to be carbon neutral by 2050, we need to know where we are now and measure the steps that we need to take from a policy, infrastructure, investment, regulation point of view to get there. But none of that legislation means anything if we don't have an administration that can follow up on it, enforce it, incentivize it, and work hard. And that's what we've got. I mean, it's the experts in our department under Colonel Dodd and his entire team that are really making this happen. So I just want to thank you all for fighting so hard on this and working so hard on this. And I will now step aside and let the residents ask their questions after your presentation. And I'm just really excited to see how we're going to get to 2050 carbon neutral. So thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Commissioner. Now we'll hear from Chris Bennett.
Yeah, thank you very much, Commissioner. Good evening, everybody. This is Chris Bennett, Assistant Director and Deputy Chief Resilience Officer with the Department of Resilience and Public Works. I'll start off by apologizing about my mobile camera issues, so please follow with me. I promise I'm here. I'm not a robot. So tonight we'll be discussing the city's plans as they relate to achieving carbon neutrality by 2050. I'm sure most of you here are asking this, but some folks still do wonder why addressing greenhouse gas emissions is important. Well, as a direct contributor to climate change and the increasing rate of global temperature rise, as well as sea level rise and various other health and safety factors, it's clear we need to reduce our emissions. The city's reduction plan and path forward is through green actions, and that's GREEN, not just a color, but G for getting around, how to get folks out of their cars and densify development around public transportation routes and stations and other ideas like that. R for renewable energy, implementing solar-friendly ordinances, educating the public about the different types and benefits of renewable energy, and working with the energy sector to clean up their fuel sources associated with their utility. E for EVs, switching the city's fleet to 100% electric vehicles, most likely with the exception of fire rescue and probably the police vehicles. Providing incentives and or infrastructure to promote the adoption of electric vehicle usage. The other E for energy efficiency, implementing our proposed Building Efficiency 305 program, setting goals and requirements for limiting, controlling, and improving energy consumption, not just in city owned and operated buildings, but for the city itself as a whole. And N for new economy, green actions equal green jobs creation, overall cost savings for everyone, more economy based on green jobs and reduction of energy consumption. Obviously, we have a lot to do working with our key partners at the federal, state, county governmental sectors, as well as utility providers like FPL and TECO Gas. However, what we really want to focus on here, especially tonight, is you and our partnership with you all. So with all that said, I would like to transition to Jonathan Klopp with our Resilience Department and have him help us kick off your question and answer sessions.
John, you're muted.
Shucks. All right. Thank you, Chris and Alyssa. So I'm about to list some of the actions we plan to commit to in each of these areas, but I also want to mention these are just highlights, and the plan has about 50 actions in total that were recommended by both experts and the community through our outreach. And we're also additionally flagging where these actions can be linked to job creation to spur our local green economy. So we're using research by the Department of Environmental Opportunity data, as well as to profile what our regional green economy looks like now and areas where we can elevate that. And so then we're going to now just get into the actions for getting around Miami. If you could, next slide, Lisa. Thank you very much. So we see here some of the main and probably the most popular actions for when it comes to adjusting transportation in the city of Miami. Just as an overview, transportation, on-road transportation actually accounts for 43% of emissions within the city of Miami. We do have some limited capacity at the city and affecting some transportation, such as Metro Rail and Metro Bus, due to jurisdiction. That's Miami-Dade County. But the city does run the free trolleys, and we do have a lot of, I think, tools in our belt that we're able to access. So the city is currently updating the bicycle master plan and intends for the plan to be complete by summer 2022. This action also includes greening the bicycle network and installing shade, water fountains, and bike repair infrastructure where feasible, and also to improve rider comfort and safety. Also, as the county owns important arterial streets, they will be a key partner. There's also TOD, or transit-oriented development, which is a type of urban development that centers communities around public transit. So Miami's existing TOD policies could be enhanced to include increased inclusionary zoning and mixed-use zoning near Metro Rail stations, increased density within a certain distance of a Metro Rail station, free commuter parking lots outside downtown area with shuttle service into the city, as well as increased investments in green space and parks near Metro Rail stations, as well as many other actions. So, and then we also have another main, which is expand micro mobility options and trolley service. So currently, most micromobility options in the city are concentrated in District 2, near the waterfront. So this action can aid residents without cars, and it considers free service for specific users. So there are some other areas within transportation where the city can lead as well. So we can reduce emissions from city employee commutes by continuing to permit work from home and hybrid flexible schedules for city employees, by improving the public transit benefits and implementing certain parking fee structures. So if anything, from COVID-19, demonstrated that telecommuting is possible and effective for city employees and some local businesses as well. So teleworking greatly reduces vehicle miles traveled and the local pollution from idling in traffic. We can also implement the Transit Alliance recommendations, which to update the trolley routes in alignment with the Better Bus project. We can, the Metro Bus route and redesign, as well as increase service where possible. So implementing the Better Bus project recommendations on the city's trolley system would improve service and also better align trolley service with the new county bus routes. Next slide, please, Alyssa. So next we move on to electric vehicles. This really cuts across both building and transportation, but some of the key actions we have here are expanding public EV charging station installations. So we can partner with the Miami Parking Authority to expand EV charging station installations in public locations. This would increase EV parking requirements for any public off-street parking facilities that will also promote the use of EVs around the city. So the city would develop a streamlined process for reviewing and approving charging station installations. So EV charging infrastructure would be prioritized for grant funding, and Miami can partner with FP&L and FDOT, for example, on this action. There's also the requiring new EV charge installations and parking starting after 2025. So building on EV capability ordinance, this would require EV charge installations in all new developments starting in 2025. And the current EV capability ordinance requires new construction over a certain size to install EV-ready spaces for 20% of new off-street parking. So Miami could expand upon this ordinance to require the installation of EV chargers. And then we move on to the electrification of the city fleet. This is where the city can really lead the way on EV infrastructure. So adopting EV infrastructure and procurement policy that would electrify 100% of the public vehicle fleet, which includes the trolleys, by 2035. The city will work with the Electrification Coalition and other technical support teams to develop an EV transition plan. The city will develop information on lessons learned through this process to share with private fleet managers. That way we can better expand this knowledge of the community, as well as excluding for the moment emergency response vehicles in the near term, but then upgrading to electric when feasible. Move to the next slide, please.
That's it for the transportation actions.
Oh, yeah, sorry. Skipping ahead too far. Forgive me.
Great. So now we are going to move into some of the questions and answers, or some of the questions rather, that the community proposed. So I want to start with this question posed by Christopher Harutner, and I'm so sorry if I messed up your last name. The first question is, what is Miami's roadmap for building out its EV infrastructure? So we have Cesar Garcia Pons here from planning. So I'm not sure if you want to start answering that.
Sure. So I think actually John made a great presentation as far as what we're doing for EV infrastructure. One of the things that we're doing is now starting in the new buildings are required to have up to 20% of the infrastructure for EV vehicles. What that does is, one of the burdens that we have found for owners is in condominiums, because in single family, it's never really been a problem, but in condominium buildings or shared buildings, that it's very difficult to retrofit a building to allow for an electric vehicle. The fact that now it's required to have the infrastructure for it, not only would it work for the 20% that John mentioned, but we believe that in the future, that capacity of the infrastructure would then be available to be modified to do 100% of the building with minor adaptations to the existing system. I think that is the biggest trigger that we're doing for EV right now.
Great. And then in addition to that, I would say that we're working on one of the actions that we have in the plan is to start thinking about what are the key locations in the city that we can install, on our own facilities and work with Miami Parking Authority. There's a lot of grants and opportunities, especially coming from the state level, to install chargers, and a lot of them, they will pay for the installation for us, which is great. So we want to start looking into what are the locations that would be great places for us to highlight and take advantage of those opportunities.
And then at the federal level, as we know, there are some recommendations as to expanding the electric vehicles charging station fleet across the country. So we'll see what happens with that particular plan or fund. If it's in there, we would be able to maybe dip into some federal money in order to create those locations or expand the infrastructure in South Florida.
Great. The next question is from Clarice Cooper, and she's here in regards to public transit and things. So I'm going to allow her to speak and pose her question. Clarice, you should be able to speak now.
Hello. Hi.
Go ahead, Clarice.
Okay. I have a quick question. Miamians seem to love their cars. They always have. And I know your plan sounds good about the alternatives as far as using bicycles and trolleys and other public transportation. But I think a harder sell needs to be moved as far as getting people totally out of their cars. Like, I don't own a car, and I get around perfectly. And I think if more people adopted that lifestyle, then you can cut down on emissions and everything else that's harmful to us. And I was wondering, can more consideration be placed on that, like people who don't have cars, of just getting people out of their cars for a greater length of time during the day?
Sure, Alyssa, I'm going to give it a first shot.
Go ahead, Cesar. Thanks. And thank you, Clarice.
Thank you, Clarice. So it's actually great. I this is personal anecdote. Is I went without a car for about a year. Every time my lease ends up or I end up selling my car, I go without a car for a while to see what it feels like to ride transit again. And it's been amazing over the 20 years that I've been doing that. Each time it gets a lot easier, particularly now with shared vehicles and all the good stuff that's been happening. But as far as policy is concerned, one of the things that we want to do at the city, and we've been talking about it, is our emphasis on increasing density at transit-oriented development stations, because we all know that adding density, it makes more efficient buildings, right? A single family building is probably the least efficient building. And by allowing you to have more people live closer to the transit stations and allowing incentives for developers to build those buildings at those locations, it gives us people without vehicles many more options, right? Not just the option of getting on a train and going to another station or another location, but we also have our trolley systems are built to engage all of the transit-oriented development stations so that you can get around the city a little bit better. And we're also changing our policies that allow for larger transit-oriented development areas. They used to be based on a 5-minute walk, and now they're based on a 5-minute bicycle shed, so that you can actually get on your bike and be able to go to a transit station. So we're trying to encourage the ability of having people live closer to transit so that it's a lot easier for them to get onto transit and maybe make that decision from going from 2 cars to 1 car, or make the decision of, I don't need a car. So as far as planning is concerned, through land use and zoning policies is how we're trying to address it.
Thank you. And I also just realized that we never introduced you, especially because you're new to the city. So Cesar Garcia Pons is the Director of Planning. Okay, so on that question as well, Chris, did you have anything you wanted to add, or John, in regards to bicycles, public transportation? Chris, I know you work in resilience of public works, so the trolley system is something that RPW oversees.
Yeah, thanks. So this is Chris again. The trolley system, obviously, our first step in terms of reducing our carbon footprint is, trying to switch our trolleys over to all electric as soon as we can. With that being said, also, we recognize that, the last mile, if you will, or quite frankly, even less than a mile of what you need to travel to get from point A to point B and to point C is really important. So we're always reevaluating and welcoming input to finding optimization to our trolley routes, the potential for adding trolley routes. But of course, that's all budget intensive. So as budgets allow, we would definitely be up for increasing our trolley system in order to provide those, as John said, free, but more importantly, 15-minute last mile connections to more folks in the city. So that's really a big one that's on my mind. And then I think it was mentioned earlier, the basically a complete redo of our comprehensive bike master plan. That's getting ready to kick off here. I believe in the next couple of months, after we sign some agreements and some grant agreements. So I think one of the biggest things that I've noticed, I don't live in the downtown core, but I've noticed it driving around and working in the city. And that is, it just does not feel safe to ride a bike, quite frankly. And you really shouldn't be doing it on the sidewalks, to be quite honest. And so we need to have some sort of master plan, again, to get you from point A to point B safely and comfortably, so more people be enticed to walk more and bike more. So that's another item that we're really, really looking forward to completing and implementing. So those are really my 2 add-on points. Cesar, thank you very much. You covered a lot of great stuff.
And I'll leave it at that, Elizabeth.
Okay, so I think we can go on to our next question. So our next question is from Michael Clarkson, who wants to know, how will the city government deal with Miami-Dade County CO2 emissions from public transit, schools, buses, and other forms of county transit? So I'm not sure if Galen is on, or if not, Alyssa, if you want to take that.
I will start, and then I'm going to ask Galen from Miami-Dade County's Office of Resilience to join me on answering this question. There was a few questions about how we're going to work together with other entities. So there's a broader question in regards to collaboration as a whole. And we'll speak more on that later. So we're going to just speak about transportation right now. But we have definitely been working with Miami-Dade County and working to align our efforts. And, obviously that Miami-Dade County's operations, especially when it comes to public transit, that goes a lot through the city of Miami. So we're going to work with them to help them or work together on goals to reduce emissions from public transit. And then when it comes to school buses, the school districts just announced that they have plans to move towards, carbon-free operations, I believe by 2030. And that includes from their buildings and their school bus fleet to an extent. So they're on a great path on their own. And so we're just happy to support their efforts and hopefully work together to provide some tools. And we haven't had that conversation with anyone at the school district yet, but that'll be a future area of opportunity. So I'm gonna now allow Galen to speak from Miami-Dade County's office.
Hey, thanks, Alyssa. This is Galen Schroyer. I'm in the Miami-Dade County Office of Resilience, and I'm working on our climate action strategy right now. So we're really trying to work with the city of Miami and be complementary, as well as the other cities. So on the transit side and the transportation side specifically, there's a lot going on. And I think the Better Bus Plan is a good example of something that is successful and is getting implemented. So we can look at that and watch that happen. And I would also say, please engage with us. We'll have public meetings in June, and everybody who's in the city of Miami is in Miami-Dade County as well. And we want to hear from you. And I think that that'll be a good time to share with our Department of Transportation Public Works what your thoughts are. In terms of the school district, we are working with them at the county level and are very excited, I would say. In our office, we're very excited about their commitment. And I know that we are actually having meetings with them now, trying to figure out how we can be supportive in getting their transition to that very ambitious goal, and also to electric buses. That's just really important for community health. I hope that answers the question. If you have more, I'm happy to jump in.
Thanks, Galen.
Thanks, Alyssa. And so our next question is from Rachel, and she wants to know, will there be assistance from marginalized communities? And Alyssa, I'll hand that to you.
Thanks, Melissa. So one thing we've definitely been conscious with throughout the plan is what is going to be the impact of these actions across the city, and making sure that there is equity, consciously considered throughout the plan. And in conversation with local groups, especially Myra Cruz and Zalalem, thank you so much, just kind of oriented the way that we were thinking about the actions of this plan is that if there is an opportunity in which we can move forward goals of climate justice and equity in our community, and in action, has an opportunity to do that, but does not, that is actually a net negative for the city. So we've really taken that mindset of we need to take every opportunity we have in this plan to address equity challenges and promote climate justice throughout. So one of the ways that we're thinking about climate justice is through the new economy work, in which we are thinking about what are the ways that we can leverage this plan to create job opportunities and economic opportunity for the whole city, but especially thinking about communities that have been historically disinvested in. We worked with Zalalem and Myra as well to think about how we would define climate justice for this plan. So thinking about, again, what are the communities that have been historically disinvested in? They tend to be areas that were historically redlined. They tend to have majority Black populations, new immigrants to the city. So those are the types, those are kind of the demographics of people and places that we're thinking about when we're thinking about climate justice for this plan. when it comes to transportation, some of the things that we're thinking about are obviously scaling up public transit, trying to increase densification in areas with high amount of transit or near metro rail stations, so that way there is less need for a car. And one thing that we want to look into that they have started to pilot in the city of Atlanta is working with like Lyft and Uber and other companies like that to have an electric vehicle car share program for those who don't have cars themselves. So that's just an initial idea, and in the plan we're thinking about just exploring that concept, but we're trying to think about what are the opportunities that we can take and leverage to promote this good across the city, especially for these specific communities and folks that need it the most. So I think that's all of our questions for transportation. So now we're going to move into building. So I'm going to share my screen, and John, I'll let you take it away.
All right, there we go. And the next slide, please. There we go. Okay, so now we're on to buildings and particularly energy efficiency. So within the city of Miami, currently our residential and commercial buildings use up about for providing energy for our residential commercial buildings uses up 55% of the emissions in our inventory. So actually the biggest chunk is actually coming from building energy supply. So we do have some jurisdictional limitations here that are mostly related to the Florida Building Code, and also some legal questions and concerns about mandates on already existing buildings. But we are seeking ways to especially address new building and bring in existing buildings into programs more willingly through participation and advocacy. So right now we have up for second reading with the City of Miami Commission on May 27th, the BE 305's benchmarking for energy and water ordinance, and that'll be for large buildings 20,000 square feet and over. Beyond that, implementing an energy performance standard is the next step after adopting a benchmarking reporting ordinance. So commercial property owners would be required to meet energy or greenhouse gas reduction targets over a set period. And so then those compliance measures are included in periodic audits and retro-commissioning. Currently, the ordinance that's in front of the commission next week only addresses benchmarking and maintenance. So future possible actions would be periodic audits and retro-commissioning. So certain performance requirements could also be met at point of sale or lease. Other draft actions include fines that could be implemented for non-compliant buildings that can be used to help then maybe fund retrofits and audits and retro-commissioning for lower income buildings. We also currently have a green building ordinance that requires all new buildings over 50,000 square feet to achieve a LEED Silver certification. So that covers up to 50,000 square feet, and then that could be increased potentially to LEED Gold, or maybe to another set of certifications such as the Living Building Challenge or Net Zero. So the building square footage thresholds for compliance could also be reduced and modified to increase the reach of these actions and plans. And this action could also promote improved monitoring and enforcement of energy-related building code requirements. So then really where the city can lead is, one, we're already currently benchmarking all of our own buildings, all public buildings. And then we can also require all new public buildings to be built in zero net energy standards starting in 2025. And then we're also requiring new public building construction to be net zero energy will help demonstrate the feasibility of this net zero construction in Miami and allow us to lead by example. Additionally, we can develop a financial and technical assistance programs for weatherization and energy efficiency that would help residents, particularly low-income residents, to pursue these climate actions and to help increase the efficiency in their own homes. So this action includes education, investigating financial mechanisms and revenue streams to fund these incentives and rebates, and also to provide this technical support. Next slide, please. So renewable energy is really a cross-cutting action group. Thank you, Lise. But there are some additional issues with jurisdiction due to state level preemptions. So it's a bit of a minefield, but we're trying to find new and innovative ways to really solve these issues. So there's solar ready new construction starting in 2022 as a possible action. Re-roofing to be solar ready, which means that solar ready requirements include providing wiring conduits, careful placement of roof vents, and reserving roof space for future solar photovoltaic infrastructure or PV. So that action can be implemented through a building ordinance, and it would not actually require solar just to be solar ready. There is an additional solar and storage requirement that could be considered in the future as well. So there's the installation of solar and storage in public buildings. So the city can lead on that action, or parking structures where that's feasible. We could prioritize critical facilities that we would like to call resilience hubs. And these resilience hubs can be used as solar pilot locations to showcase solar and battery storage systems within a facility designated to provide critical services during power outages or major storm events, storm surge, etc. So that requirement also would apply to existing buildings at the time of substantial retrofit, so 50% or more of the floor plan being adjusted or renovated. So in the future, that policy could be expanded to require new buildings to install solar, and installing a storage-ready solar system would also reduce future battery installation costs, which would provide energy security in the case of a power outage. Additionally, other places the city can lead here are to join FPNL's Solar Together program to purchase all of the city's building electricity from solar. That would then, to support utility level solar and address emissions from city buildings, the city can purchase its electricity from installed solar from FPNL. So that program will be open for cities, another enrollment round in somewhere between 2022 and 2024. We're hopefully keeping our fingers crossed that it's sooner rather than later. And then additionally, the city can make all non-emergency energy use in existing public buildings carbon-free by 2035. Since that's a bit more of a retrofit task, it takes a little bit longer. So we would then explore and adopt as much clean energy emergency generation and battery storage as possible. And that's it for the building actions. Thank you, Alyssa.
Thanks,
Thank you, John.
Go ahead, Alyssa.
Nope, you can take it away.
I was just gonna say, so we can jump into questions now. So the first one is from Gianna and Gabriel, and they'd like to know, how will the city be able to follow through with their energy commitments now that the state has preempted utility regulations? And Chris is not here.
Yeah, I can start with that. And then we have Vanessa Go here from AECOM, who has been our partner in developing our greenhouse gas reduction plan and our some of the targets. And she can speak to kind of some of the adjustments that were made in our overall goals to adjust. So as of right now, we're looking into the language and the true restrictions of the legislation. That's something that communities across the state are doing, just to be clear on what is limited. But the overall idea of the ordinance was to preempt local governments from basically passing legislation requiring anything of utilities and regulating kind of what fuel mix standards for the cities can be, without even being able to restrict new installations of gas lines, gas utility service connections, or appliances in the city. We have the ability to pass regulations and develop programs that will incentivize people to make them transition on their own. That's something that we can still do. It does slow the transition, but there's still things that we can do. It should also be noted that on-site natural gas is a pretty small portion of the fuel mix for the emissions for city emissions. And what is kind of the bigger concern is the fuel mix for the electricity grid, because most of the building emissions come from electricity. So that's kind of that's kind of the issue that needs to be addressed, and that lies with FPL. The city will continue working on educating the public on sources and impacts of greenhouse gas emissions, providing information about how to transition and reduce natural gas use. And we'll continue to meet and work with the utility providers to push them to be more environmentally friendly. So, the way that we're working to address this right now is just thinking about ways to push for behavior change and incentivization to encourage people because that is the limit of our jurisdiction at this time. And Vanessa, are you here to just speak a little bit about some of the adjustments we made in our plan?
Sure. So in order to meet the 2035 interim greenhouse gas reduction target, we had to shift some of our goals from the building sector because we no longer have as much direct control as we thought we did to the transportation sector. So to meet that emissions gap that is now there because of these preemption laws for buildings and for building energy consumption, we'll have to move towards a higher target or a more ambitious target for reducing emissions from transportation instead. So what this looks like so far, and this is something we're still working on, but it looks like a higher push towards vehicle electrification or zero emission vehicles and more mode switching. But that's still in the works right now. But just to meet that 2035 target, since all of these laws are coming into effect, we're seeing how we can balance emissions better in other sectors while we're developing these new building policies.
Thanks so much, Vanessa. Appreciate that. The next question we have is from Clara Ransom, and she is here, so I'm going to allow her to speak and ask her question. Clara, you should be able to speak now.
Okay, hi, thank you. The solar panels, that's my question about the solar panels. And when will the city of Miami put solar panels on their city buildings? They're a lot cheaper than FP&L, and there's huge tax incentives for business owners and homeowners, and you can get them installed with zero money down, and it provides jobs for the community too. So yeah, that's the question. When will the city put solar panels on the city buildings?
Thanks, Claire. And in addition, we kind of had an add-on. Michael Clarkson had asked a related question of, how is the city going to be going about reducing greenhouse gas emissions from its building? So I want to hand this one off to John Klopp to start.
Actually, maybe is anyone from GSA here?
They are not.
They're not. Okay. Well, it's really a nascent kind of action. We haven't really gone into a thorough evaluation of exactly which buildings we can put solar onto, but the eventual goal, so we don't have a timeline is what I mean to say there, but the eventual goal is to have, including the larger public buildings such as the police department and our main city offices, as well as to have them on the resilience hubs in each of the parks in the different neighborhoods. And maybe Alyssa can talk a bit more about that afterwards. But we're also currently moving our main city building, which is our largest building by square footage. The Miami Riverside Center, the MRC, will be transitioning to a new building in the next few years, I believe. And so that's where we're trying to have the discussion now about how we can institute the solar into that building. But that's an ongoing conversation.
Right. And in regards to the resilience hubs, so that concept is thinking about what are city buildings, and we're thinking about city parks that can be used as central convening locations, year round, but also especially in times of, disaster response, and thinking about how we can harden them and outfit them with social services as well. So that way they can serve all of these social resilience functions for our communities. So some of those functions could be cooling centers, but also having those buildings have solar and storage on them themselves. So that way they can provide that energy redundancy in the case of a blackout. So people are with power in these times of emergency. I will say a discussion internally in the city is in regards to solar is the maintenance of them is something that is a concern. We need skilled people to maintain the panels, and just the operations around that is something that we are starting to look into. So it's that one's a very early stages thing, but we know for sure that we can definitely work with FPL in the meantime to basically purchase solar from them So that way our building sector emissions basically are all coming from renewable and therefore are carbon neutral. So that's something that we are excited for the opportunity when it opens up in, I think, 2022 or 2023.
Yeah, and I just wanted to add briefly that, we're also looking into doing a vulnerability assessment for the city's critical facilities and other facilities. And so part of that assessment would be collecting data on the status of buildings, and hopefully that would help us to inform which buildings would actually be able to have solar and facilitate solar panels on them. So again, that's something in the very early stages that we're talking about, but hopefully that can help to inform the process as well.
And so while I can't say exactly what year we would begin to put solar panels on all these larger buildings that the city owns and operates, I will reiterate that the action we have listed in the draft plan has existing public buildings being carbon free by 2035. So that would be the goal.
Thanks, John. So our next question is from Christopher, and he'd like to know, are there any resources for looking at Miami-Dade County's most energy consumptive building? John, I think that might be one for you.
I'm sorry, I couldn't actually hear that well. Could you repeat, please?
Yeah, so this question is from Christopher, and he says, is there any resources for looking at Miami-Dade County's most energy consumptive buildings?
Okay, so Miami-Dade County would be outside of our jurisdiction. I can say that we are working with them on the B305 program, as well as City of Miami Beach. And so we are looking to basically benchmark all of the energy and water consumption across these large buildings, that we can begin to give the owners and operators a better concept of where they stand and how they could possibly easily fix some of these low efficiency issues, since large buildings can lose waste up to 30% of their water and electricity usage. So that is what the B305 program is geared towards. And so right now we're focusing on benchmarking and then looking forward towards possible energy performance standards, for example. But again, maybe Galen or someone else could talk briefly about what the county's doing.
Right, and we have Jose Regalado here as well, who's assisting with implementing the BE 305 program. So if Jose has anything to add, I invite him to do so. And Galen, I'll allow you to speak if you want to speak to county building emissions after Jose.
No, on the topic of city facilities, we are going to be benchmarking and including that into the program. So that will allow us to identify the areas that require solar sooner rather than later. If there's any other questions about B305, Commissioner Russell is also the sponsor of the ordinance. This is a crucial part for the city's plan for the greenhouse gas plan. It will require benchmarking for buildings over 20,000 square feet to report their annual energy and water usage. And then that will be shared publicly. So building owners and residents alike will be able to actually view and track the improvements of energy efficiency over time. But if there's any specific questions to that, I'm here to answer those.
Thanks, Jose. Now we have Galen here from Miami-Dade County's Office of Resilience.
Thank you, Alyssa. I'm just going to say quickly that we will be happy to talk more about county level stuff at some of our meetings coming up in June. And we're always happy to talk about building efficiency. We also have a B305 ordinance that's been drafted and currently are doing the B305 challenge, which is getting some of those bigger buildings to start doing the benchmarking work voluntarily. We have over 50 buildings signed up right now.
Yeah, and I would say a good number of those are in the city of Miami. So that's been helpful in resolving that kind of anticipated pushback on the program, because we have city of Miami large buildings already doing this and knowing what the benefits are and how easy it can be done. So that's been helpful to us.
And we should say this will save you a lot of money. We know it, right? Like it really is something that is a win. So let's just remember that. It's pretty exciting.
Over the first 5 years of the program, actually, it's estimated that City of Miami tenants and owner operators will save about $15.6 million.
Thank you. So our next question we have from Clarice Cooper again. So I'm going to allow you to speak, Clarice, and you can ask your buildings question.
Okay, thank you, Alyssa.
I think your audio.
You hear me?
Now we can. Go ahead.
Yeah, my question is, I live in Coconut Grove, and everybody wants to live in Coconut Grove, and there's a lot of current and proposed construction that'll be going on. A lot of it is transit oriented, I understand, but then there's something that's not, not exactly high rises, but also low rises. And with the population growth that we go expecting, and I guess it's proposed, wouldn't we be affected by that, the residents? Isn't that going to propose like some kind of harm to us health-wise, especially if the plans to make buildings more efficient is not kept up with the population growth? It's like it has to be monitored to make sure that we aren't going to be put at a greater risk if the plans to modify buildings is not kept up.
Thank you, Clarice. I'm going to pitch that question first to Cesar Garcia Pons, and speaking about, some of the transit-oriented development. And I know we have our Miami 21 update happening, so maybe you can speak to that one to start.
Thank you, Clarice. So it's hard for me to think about undue harm. I know that the fact that we're trying to create more efficient housing, more housing that is more towards LEED goals, that we're trying to consolidate them so that they're more towards transit, so that they don't have vehicles. I don't know how the policies that we have could negatively affect anybody who's currently in Coconut Grove. I think it actually benefits them because we are encouraging the growth that we anticipate happening in the city and the county, in the places where we can better control the use of the potential impact on greenhouse gases. I wasn't quite sure exactly what kind of harm you're talking about. I think you caveated it by saying that if the buildings don't meet our standards, and if the buildings aren't built the way that we are electing them to be, that's all we have codes, is they will be. And we're trying to put those protections in place going forward so that any new population and any new construction that happens for the new population is of a higher level of quality than the existing stock that we have now. I don't know, maybe somebody from building might be able to answer that a little bit better.
Jose, you want to take a
I can add to it that for the efficiency portion, this only affects buildings that are over 20,000 square feet, and specifically there is a what they call retuning, which is that we ensure that maintenance is being applied to every building that is over 50,000 square feet, and that's already quite large. That's a large multifamily, usually multiple floors of five floors, that will require what you asked specifically. From the greater topic of density and that question, I think that's harder to answer.
Right. And then, go ahead.
No, I was just saying, but for the building efficiency requirements, we will enforce them. They are mandatory for all buildings over 20,000 square feet.
Great. And one of the other things that we're discussing with planning and recommending in this action is increasing transit-oriented development, but in places that are kind of on the northern stretch of the Metro Rail. So thinking about some of those places further along that are less dense, but could be kind of more dense nodes of communities, more residential, more proximity to places that people need to go to run errands. So not just the housing, but also, the supermarkets and the stores and things like that. So starting to explore what are these areas throughout the city that could kind of see that densification grow in a way that's responsible. And that is a way that we can reduce vehicle miles traveled and therefore greenhouse gas emissions. And, that's just one benefit. There's so many other quality of life benefits that can come from these densified cities, the 15-minute city, as a lot of, environmentalists will call it. So that's just one thing that we are discussing in the plan. And I think with that, we have a few time for some of the chat questions. So I'll hand it to Melissa.
Okay, so we had some other additional ones that came in earlier. Should we start there?
Yeah, I messaged you some of the ones that I think are good to address now, and some of them we can address when we get into the next section. Let's see on the chat here.
My chat function is acting up. Do you want to go ahead and read it, Alyssa, because I'm having trouble?
Yeah, no problem. The first one I'm seeing to answer now is from Jimmy Lai. Which city department would be in charge of installing the electric car charging stations in the city? And is this already in process? Are there already EV chargers in the city? So Jose, maybe you want to talk to who would be the city department responsible for installing EV chargers or working with installers?
Yeah, we won't be directly installing, but the building department will be permitting and checking to ensure that they meet the requirements.
Yeah, and then in regards to do we already have them in the city? Yes, we do. In our Miami Parking Authority operated garages, I forget the exact number, but we have quite a few throughout the city. I know, at City Hall, I know that there was a few at the Marlins Park parking garage. I think at some of the ones in downtown, I don't know the exact locations off the top of my head. We've had partnerships with local providers and local installers that have been the one who have spearheaded that. And the kind of model that has been presented to the city thus far is, that these companies are saying, we will pay and steward the installation of the chargers if they're allowed to, be the ones who provide the charging as a service. Similarly, FPL is offering to install chargers on city properties and in agreement with, them being the owner and operators of the chargers for a number of years. So that's just kind of some models that have been presented to us thus far. I know that there was a question about our private businesses, can they put their hat in the ring for those type of opportunities? And to that, I'd say yes. So that would be something that would probably come to the Office of Resilience to start. And then we would, discuss the rest of that, but we're certainly open to working with local businesses on these EV installations. And then the other question, oh, wait, nope, I answered the other question.
And Gabriel has a question about more publicly accessible charging stations instead of going to a parking facility. So again, we're working on that thing.
Yeah, so that's part of, we're again trying to figure out what is going to be the key locations in the city throughout. And there's different opportunities, from the state level. They're looking to install DC fast chargers along the I-95 corridor. So those will probably be in places that are openly accessible, but definitely hearing your comment about wanting them to be in places that are already open. So you're not paying for charging and paying for parking. Understood. So great. I think we can move into the next section. So I will share my screen, and John, you can speak about the last bit of actions for the plan. And you are muted if you are speaking.
Sorry, I was having a technical difficulty there. I think I got it worked out now though.
We can hear you.
All right, awesome. So please forgive me, my phone has just died and my laptop does not currently have a webcam, so I no video for the moment. All right, so we have here a few more actions that are really geared more towards advocacy and partnership, where maybe the city doesn't have exact jurisdiction to have a direct effect or to enact a specific change, but through advocacy and partnership, we can maybe still achieve those goals. So first up, we have working with Miami-Dade County and local advocacy groups to increase utilization of public transit through investments in safety, improving public transit literacy and campaigns. So the city will support and enhance any county outreach campaign for the bus system through actions such as investing in safety measures and improving on public transportation literacy. Then we also have developing technical guidance for building owners and managers that will facilitate EV charging infrastructure installations. So technical barriers to installing EV chargers can be overcome with the proper guidance and troubleshooting related to common building types and challenges in Miami. So additional guidance will be provided by the City of Miami to help private fleets transition to electric vehicles. And then next, please, Alyssa. And I'm afraid my computer has completely glitched just now. So if you actually wouldn't mind taking up that last slide for me.
Sure. So again, these advocacy actions are ways for us to address some of the issues that are outside of our direct control. Obviously, as we mentioned before, there are actions that affect the City of Miami, but we don't have a direct jurisdiction on. So some of the other actions that we are considering is partnering with community organizations, nonprofits, trade organizations, the utilities to develop a carbon-free building electrification or a carbon-free building education program and information on technical assistance. Again, because we cannot require buildings to be all electric, we can provide education, resources, and again, advocacy to push people in that direction, especially when we start talking about the health benefits, the cost benefits, and all the good things that can come from these programs. And this is even, not just natural gas related, it's all the different, green building materials, all of the different types of building type of orientations and standards that we can advocate for. So just green buildings as a whole. And then lastly, as mentioned, a lot of our building sector emissions come from electricity mostly. So working with FPL is going to be key throughout this process, over the next 30 years in which we hope to achieve carbon neutrality. So continuing to work with them to encourage and advocate for climate forward policies, including protection of net metering, funding of programs to assist low-income residents with energy efficiency upgrades, and thinking about the ways that the city can participate in the state conversations around that, including comments at the Public Service Commission and things like that. So with that, I will stop sharing. We have some questions already submitted, and then I think we'll have some time for some of these additional Q&A questions because we've been going through them pretty quickly. So that's great.
Yeah.
I think, hold on, Ada Curtis is here, so I'm going to allow her to speak to ask this first question, Melissa.
Yeah.
Ada, you should be able to speak.
Yes, thank you. And my name is Aida Curtis. And I wanted to ask, why is the planting of more canopy trees or even mangroves, which have proven to be a very effective carbon sinks, not being considered in the plan? Not even mentioned in the plan.
Thanks, Ada. I will start with an answer, and then maybe some of our other building planning folks will have additional things to say about what has been going on with the trees and everything in the city. So we have a list of co-benefits in the back end of the plan. And we had a section called green infrastructure in which we evaluated a lot of our actions. We saw that there was not a lot of green infrastructure or co-benefits that came from the actions. So that's something that we want to, that's something that we're thinking about. When it comes to this plan, the original intention was to get existing greenhouse gas emissions that we can account for to, the emissions going out to zero. So what this plan addresses at this moment in time is getting the emissions that are coming out from city activities to as close to zero as possible. When it comes to carbon accounting, it's quite difficult to account for carbon sinks and sequestration. So in this original draft of the plan, they just really didn't come up because we couldn't say, planting a tree is going to take, this specific amount out of the air, and we couldn't put it in our calculation. So we were just trying to get what is the emissions coming out to zero. We've heard this feedback quite a bit, and we're realizing it was a big deficit in the plan. So we're trying to figure out exactly what is the best way to address it in this plan or in a separate body of work, but certainly in a way that's made explicit. So that feedback is heard, and we hope to address it. We will address it in the final version of the plan. And I'm not sure if Jose or Cesar or even the commissioner want to speak on some of the tree initiatives that have been happening in the city that kind of complement this work. I know Southwest
Sure.
Streetscape's been a great initiative. Just for one, if I can offer a suggestion.
No, thank you, Alyssa, and thank you, Aida, for that question. I completely agree with you. Trees are probably the greatest piece of green infrastructure that we have. And if there were a way to quantify the benefit, I think it would be such an important tool for us in so many ways. Not only could we encourage and measure what we're planting in our own medians and swales and parks, we can encourage that on private property as well. Really, I hope that that trees become part of the value of a property rather than just the built-out square footage of a structure. And one way to do that is to give them actual value by showing what they produce for us. I do believe there must be a standard practice out there for measuring the amount of sequestration, the amount of oxygen production, the amount of temperature reduction, and so many things. And it can be specific to tree species and age and diameter. And I really believe we can do that. There was an initiative in my office through some of my staff to start a program like this a few years ago, and they created a mini pilot program where we were trying to come up with this concept and look for best practices out there. So I would certainly encourage it from staff, and I'm happy to help in any way possible to see that it does, that tree measurement does become part of our green infrastructure plan for reducing emissions and improving.
And if I may add, the city does have I would say, fairly robust plan with regards to tree planting and the requirements of mitigation of trees that existing for new construction and street tree requirements. And actually, I don't know if Ida's still on the call and we can give her speaking rights again, but we are currently working with Curtis and Rogers on the Southwest Street Tree Master Plan,
Yes.
which is the idea of looking at studying parts of the city and how we can drastically improve the situation of not only how it looks and feels, but how it actually generates, reduces the heat island effect and reduces the amount of stormwater that goes through. And I know that, again, Curtis Rogers is doing a great job. And I don't know if you want to talk for a minute about that project, although it's not part of this plan. It is an incredible first step, or phase one, as we think of, we call it the Southwest Street Tree Master Plan, but really we see it as a phase one of a citywide master plan. And I'll sort of cue it up if you want.
Yeah, and thank you, Cesar. And yes, that's part of my question. And in fact, we in our Southwest Streetscape Master Plan, we are showing where the deficiencies are, where for the trees, where we are lacking trees, and the urban heat island, where that has been aggravated more by the lack of trees. And there is data available. And in fact, we can help with the data and in fact add those numbers to our plan. And part of what we need to start doing as a community is we need to start thinking of trees as part of the infrastructure of the city. We keep on pushing this issue, but it just seems like it falls on the wayside. I mean, I was in reviewing the stormwater master plan also. There's very little about green infrastructure, and yet again, the data keeps proving that these are really, really effective. Not only from the reduction of carbon, the drawdown of carbon, but also very cost-effective and simple solutions. So we definitely are ready, and we can include that as part of our Southwest Streetscape calculations, so that we can do that.
Thanks, Ida. And then maybe, Jose, I know maybe we touch upon the sort of sensors that we were talking about. The idea of further cataloging and establishing the metrics by which we can measure these things is something that we're doing a pilot project that Jose knows more about than I do.
Yeah, the city is involved in numerous different pilot projects, including the sensors and long-term data. Today, we actually had a conversation specific to trees with Google. So the one that Caesar was mentioning was a partnership with Microsoft for both air quality sensors, and now they're engineering completely new sensors that measure the heat island effect that the city will then receive. The idea is that we would put them in the Southwest Street Tree Master Plan area to track over time as we start doing plantings to see how that affects the heat island effect. So it's there's a lot of information out there. There's a lot of information that we still need to baseline it, but it is a priority of the city, and hopefully we continue to get more outreach and more community engagement to keep it so.
I just placed a link in the chat to a tree plotter inventory that FIU started in Coconut Grove with a program they called Relief, L-E-A-F, and you can feel free to Google that to learn more about it. But if you click on that link that I put in the chat, you'll see the start of at least a mapping of species of trees in Coconut Grove.
All right, thank you. We'll move on to the next one.
Sounds good. So William is actually here with us, but his question is, does the city have plans to coordinate with other municipalities or the county for climate actions it cannot achieve on its own? So maybe Alyssa, Galen, and Commissioner Russell, you can all take a stab at this one.
Yeah, definitely. I will call on Galen for the last time. But see, we're working together. He's here. He's listening to the conversation. Again, we have been working in communication, close communications, really, with the Miami-Dade County, and working to align our plans and making sure that our goals are shared, that we are helping each other achieve, our carbon neutrality goals. We are both committed to carbon neutrality by 2050, if not sooner. So I don't really have an explicit answer in which, I can say like this equals this, but right now we're both in the phases of developing our plans. And as we're in this development phase, we're having the conversations to make sure that our goals are aligned and speaking to one another and, augmenting each other, complementing each other. Galen, do you want to speak a little bit more on that?
Sure. Yeah, no, I think that is true, and that we should recognize that Resilient 305 has really provided a platform for us to talk to each other and coordinate at like multiple levels. So we're working at the staff level, and I think that, the resilience officer level, it's happening. And I think maybe the commissioner can speak more to kind of the political level, but we're really trying to make sure that, like, on the technical side, all of our plans can speak to each other, and really helping each other come up with new ideas and really not go on our own paths.
Thanks, Galen. We can go to the next one, Melissa.
Okay. So Jake would like to know, how do you reconcile the greenhouse gas plan with Mayor Suarez's promotion of cryptocurrency, which has a massive carbon footprint? Commissioner Russell, do you have any comments on that one?
Thank you. Yes, mysteriously, the update on cryptocurrencies was removed from the last City Commission agenda. So there may be a rethink on that. I wasn't given an explanation for why that item was withdrawn. But a lot of that publicity and news about the carbon impact of cryptocurrencies came about or became more widely known in the weeks after the city started doing this consideration. So I look forward to seeing what comes back in that analysis, because that has not been part of the discussion yet, but it certainly should be. The mayor has publicly stated on Twitter, at least, that he believes cryptocurrencies should be driven by renewable energy sources, the mining that's involved, but that certainly is not the case right now.
Great. And I'll just say, just briefly on that topic, obviously we've been developing this with kind of the past greenhouse gas emissions as our baseline and things like that. So this is a new territory for us as well in regards of, the counting and things like that. We don't know the impacts until they happen, but we can plan to be proactive. But the biggest thing, as we've mentioned before, is, we have to think about the electricity mix. That's what the big concern around that is, basically the energy draw, and thinking about where we're getting energy from. So to Commissioner Russell's point and the mayor's, is moving towards carbon-free and renewable energy is one way to address and mitigate that issue. And in Florida, maybe if it becomes a big enough sector, then it's something that motivates that change more quickly. So we try to think about what are the silver linings and potentially the benefits that we can leverage from these technology changes.
Sounds good. Thank you both. So the next question is from Anastasia and Ellen. They had similar questions around food waste. And so they'd like to know, they've said reducing food waste is one of the top 3 solutions to reverse climate change. Composting cuts landfill and methane emissions. Are there any plans to offer residents an opportunity to compost or reduce food waste?
Yeah, so I'll speak to that. And Vanessa's still here, so maybe she can also speak to our some of the way that we've accounted for waste or the way we have not accounted for waste in our greenhouse gas inventory in our plan. But I spoke with the solid waste department, and they were mentioning, that wide scale municipal compost is extremely challenging. Even in South Florida, there's limited locations, or even no locations. I think they said no locations in 200 miles of here that would be able to handle municipal level compost. The conversation internally in the city, and we would love to work with nonprofit partners and things, is thinking about kind of these small scale composting projects. When we had the fish kill at the end of last year, we worked with a local group to do composting of the fish that were recovered from the fish kill. So we know that there are groups out there that are very passionate about this and probably have more skill in it than some of the city staff. So thinking about community composting initiatives, and especially partnering with a local group, is something that that's something we'd like to consider. But the reason why there is a lack of solid waste, actions in this plan is the data that the city has, and especially the city collected waste, goes to the waste to energy plant that has significantly less negligible greenhouse gas emissions or carbon emissions. So in the way that it's accounted for in the plan, the waste that gets contributed to or converted into energy then becomes a building sector emission because it's being used for electricity. So that's why it's not accounted for in the greenhouse gas inventory, and therefore not present in the plan. That's not to say that food waste and solid waste is not an issue in the city. We know that it is, and especially when it comes to illegal dumping, that's something that I've seen a few people mention on the side here. But just to say the framework of this plan, at least at this moment in time, has been how do we get the greenhouse gas emissions that we can account for that are coming out from city operations to as close to zero as possible. And just because that we don't have it included in our inventory is the reason why it has not been included in this plan at this moment.
Vanessa, did you want to add anything to that?
No, what Alyssa said was great. That's it's just an issue of emissions accounting. So all of the solid waste emissions, since they're being sent to this waste to energy facility, those emissions are accounted for in the electric grid emissions factor, which we use to calculate our electricity emissions. So it is being accounted for, just in a different sector.
We do still have a composting permit, a not so easy to get permit that even though we do not currently have a composting program, the solid waste department holds this permit over at Virginia Key on the old mulching site. And there are some talks with Key Biscayne actually to potentially put together a cooperation between our cities on that site utilizing our permit, but possibly for an anaerobic composting system. Not cheap, but something that doesn't have the negative effects of traditional composting, but still produces the positive effects. And they were originally looking at it in order to compost potentially sargassum seaweed. But of course, it could also be used to compost any of our compostable waste in the city of Miami. But right now we have the permit, we have the land, but we do not have the expensive machinery.
Okay, so one of the last ones that came in earlier is from Gabriel, and Commissioner, this one might be for you. So he's wanting to know, how does a startup citizen initiative get a chance to present solutions?
Hey, you're muted.
I want to make sure I understand the question correctly. Is that a startup company, such as someone who's starting a new company, or a startup idea, a group that's trying to get together to do something? Can you clarify the question?
Like an idea. Someone who's got an idea for a solution, or they could be a person who could work with us on a solution.
We love ideas that come with manpower. What we usually get are a lot of ideas of what we should be doing, and where we can, we do. But a lot of times it takes a champion. It takes someone that really wants to step up and lead that effort. And if you're willing to do that, we will definitely try to help make sure the doors are open for you to be able to accomplish whatever that goal might be. So please feel free to reach out to my office at krussell@miamigov.com. Any ideas you have for initiatives, we'll help direct it in the right way. And if there's resources you need or permitting you need for events or concepts, our ears are open. We really appreciate your advocacy.
Thank you. And then we have time for one last question. I'm going to read from, or actually she's raising her hand, so I'm going to allow Zelalem to talk. She's one of our great community advocates. Never a complete climate forum without Zelalem. So you should be able to speak now. Zelalem, go ahead.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much. Congratulations to the staff on a really excellent plan, and to the county on partnership. And thank you so much, Chairman Russell, for hosting this. It's been so helpful. I had a couple questions for you. I really love, everything that's been discussed, but it seems like a lot of these action items will come down to policy and legislation. And I want to see if we can make sure that the quality of the work stays the same as it moves through the policymaking process. So I'm wondering, with those in the last appendix of the report that had climate justice, there were some that said negative benefits. If there's a way in the legislative process to ensure that we make sure that those are positive, because I don't think we should do undue harm on disadvantaged and underserved communities. And you said you like people to offer, so I'd totally be happy to do whatever I can to help with that brainstorming or advocacy in that way. And just like one more request, I was wondering too, you talked about the Miami Forever Bond. So in Miami 21, I think they're going through the process of looking at that code. And I wanted to know if you would be willing, or if you are championing like incorporating like the climate action pieces of this plan, as well as some equity pieces around gentrification and displacement, while the city is doing that kind of rewrite and review as well.
Thank you for those questions. Those are great. Am I muted again? I'm good. The gentrification and displacement is one that the commission is definitely on board with unanimously. We have some different philosophies about how to handle it. I've introduced the state's first mandatory inclusionary zoning policy, which did not pass easily, but it did pass, and we're still working on that. And I know that affordability is going to be a big part of the rewrite to Miami 21. I do look forward to seeing what they come up with in terms of resilience in construction. And what I'm hoping to see are more of an incentive-based system where maybe development it gets some benefit. The deeper they go into resilience, the more benefit they get, whether it's financial or from a construction perspective or a permitting perspective. We do that for affordability right now, that if the deeper they go in affordable, they may get more additional square footage or density, that sort of thing. But I look forward to seeing that. As far as keeping the work product good as it goes through the political process, I cannot promise that. There's nothing that good science can't be undone by bad politics. And so I will do my best. But I have to tell you, this department has done a great job of crafting legislation that has survived the gauntlet of the City of Miami Commission. It's not easy to get legislation through. And fortunately, you only need 3 votes, but the fertilizer ordinance was a perfect example that Alyssa and the entire team here put together. I get to take credit for it as it passes, because maybe the harder part is actually getting that gavel to fall and get the vote. But I certainly didn't write that legislation. It was done by this team, but it was also sold in by this team to each of the commissioners. And when the commission feels that there's safety in this concept, and there's a champion on the dais that wants it, it gets a little less political. And that was a perfect example that worked out great. Could have gone completely wrong, because someone could have argued that a fertilizer ordinance is a violation of someone's property rights and their ability to nourish the plants on their property when they want to. But it passed unanimously. So I look forward to more of that, and I think that was a good template for how to move forward. And hopefully we get it right more than we get it wrong.
Thanks so much, Commissioner. We're at time now, so I would just like to hand the mic back to you for any closing comments you have before we end the evening.
Was that for me?
Yes, if you have any closing comments, but
not
required.
I just have to say I'm really, really super impressed with this group that showed up here. We got 33 participants still on this Zoom, and that's one of the larger participation roundtables we've had on any topic, especially for this amount of time. People clearly care about this issue, and we need your help. It does help when you submit ideas. It does help when you show up at City Hall. When we have one of these items and you speak in a positive and productive way at the commission, it can move votes. It does make a difference. So I really encourage you to stay active and write your commissioners on these initiatives. Another big one that we passed not long ago was changing the code to punish development that silts into the bay, that doesn't control their runoff. Again, could have been a very controversial one, but we got it through in a unanimous way. So I have a lot of optimism for the City of Miami. I think we've come a long way over the last few years. We are making the right investment, making the right policy. We're not as good as the rest of the world may think we are, but we have the potential to be, and we have the need to be, since we are on the front line of these issues in our geographic location. So I really appreciate all the comments, especially those about making sure underserved communities stay at the forefront of this. I reset the entire Sea Level Rise Committee a few years back because it did not have a social justice seat on it, and it now does. And that's a big part of resilience in our conversation. We're going to keep moving forward. So keep your eye on us and please hold us accountable, and please appreciate the staff for their hard work, because it makes a big difference. Have a good night, everybody, and thank you.
Thank you. And thank you again, Commissioner Russell, for being here, for having this idea to have this meeting and co-hosting with us. So claps for you. Before people head off, I just want to say thank you so much for participating. Thank you, Jose and Caesar, for being here as well to speak to what is happening and being championed by the other departments. We hope to continue engaging and keeping this process iterative. The public comment period for this portion of the greenhouse gas reduction plan closes this Sunday, May 23rd at 11:59 p.m. So you have all day Sunday to do some light reading in response to the plan. You can visit our website where you can get more information about this at www.miamigov.com/GHG plan. That's GHG for greenhouse gas plan. And lastly, after hearing from a few of you, all of you, we will be having a separate public comment period for the new economy, green economy portion of the plan when it's ready. So stay tuned on that. And that information will be posted again on that website, miamigov.com/GHG plan, and pushed out through our regular channels, our newsletters, our, all the city social media and things like that. The GHG plan website has a link to the draft, the comment form, and other resources. And in addition, you can hear monthly updates from us at our Resilience Action Forum, which is on the 4th Tuesday of every month. And the next one is May 25th. So that's coming up soon. So we hope to keep engaged with you all. Thank you so much for coming this evening, and have a great night. And hold on, I need to do gallery view so Alejandro can take a picture of all of us. So we are going to wave. Thank you everyone for joining us this evening. Have a good one. Bye-bye.